In this tutorial, we are going to be taking the light switch that we made, where we previously had it set and assigned 2-point lights to it. We're going to make it functional. So when the user comes up, presses E on the light, it's going to turn any point light that is in the array off or on, as well as the mesh over here. If you're looking to see, it's on the off position. If it's off, it's going to change it to the on position. If it's on, it's going to change it to the off position. And it's going to track with the lights accordingly. So, let's go ahead and get started. Here in Visual Studio, we need to actually make it so we can interact with our light switch. So that means we need to actually have a way of calling and setting our, using our ray trace functions. So since this is just strictly a light switch video tutorial, I'm just going to make the function inside of ray trace and call it whenever the user presses E, just like we did before. The first thing you need to do, you need to include the input component. So that's include components / input component. And now we need to get it. So u input component player input component equals get owner find component by class. Here's where you type the name of the component. In our case, u input component. Now we need to make sure that component is not null. So if player input component does not equal null pointer, we can assign it to do something. So we need to first make a little function. Oh, I've already made it, but void test function. Oh, actually, let's name it something different. Void toggle light switch. Void u ray trace toggle light switch. And here's where we use bind action. So player input component bind action, then the name of the action, which was object interactions. Oops. Then the key event, which was press, so IE underscore pressed. The object that we're in, so this. And our function, which is ray trace toggle light switch. Let's go ahead and, well, I guess we can print out a log real quick. UE log temp warning text and toggle switch. As well as this will also be commented out if you followed exactly with the last tutorial. So you can go ahead and uncomment the drawing of the debug line for get traced actor, just so we can see it and make sure we're actually hitting the light switch, since we don't currently have a crosshair or anything to really help us with our aim. Let's go ahead and build. And head over to the light switch. Press E. And as you can see, it's in toggle light switch. Forgot I'm not actually calling the ray trace function, so I don't know why I walked up to it. So now what we can do is we can go ahead and call our ray trace function. So remember, it returns an actor, so a actor equals get traced actor. If actor does not equal null pointer, then we want to get the light switch itself. So what we can do, what we actually want to call our function that we're going to make. So we need to include light switch. So include, did not spell that right, light switch.h. Still didn't spell that right. And there we go. So if the light switch is, well, it is finding a valid actor. we want it to be able to call our function here. So let's go ahead and make a public function. Call it void toggle light. Over here in our CPP, void a light switch toggle light. Let's go ahead and set beep can ever take to false. I don't remember if I did that before. And just for now, let's go ahead and build it. And we can kind of think of what we're going to do. First off, we know we need to call it. So actor toggle. Oh, we actually need to get. There it goes. Can't go straight off the actor. We need to convert it from a actor to a light switch. So we can simply cast it. So if, I think casting returns something. Cast to a light switch from actor. Then we will simply, wait, no, duh. I gotta assign it to something so I can actually read it. So check if light switch is not null. And semicolon. Alright, so now we can do light switch. Nailed it. Light switch. Toggle light. So now we can go ahead and print out a little log message. Toggle light to make sure. Log temp. Warning. Text. And just spam it. And Control Shift B. Missed it. Yep, it's printing out our stupid message. So we are in fact calling the toggle light switch function inside of our light switch actor. I'm actually just going to leave that here. So that way whenever we use it, we can actually read out in the log and make sure that it is in fact running. So a couple of things we need to do. We need to include a couple of things. Since we are going to be changing the mesh from the on mesh to the off mesh of the light switch, we need to include the static mesh component. Since we are controlling point lights, we need to include that, as well as to use various functions such as set visibility for the light. We need to include light component. So these will all be in the description, so you can just copy those and paste them up on the top of your .cpp file. So now we want to go ahead and take our current mesh and put that in our header here. Well, actually, we don't really need to get the mesh now that I think about it. Instead, we actually need to set what we want the on mesh to be and what we want the off mesh to be. So for that, we can use uProperty, edit anywhere, category equals, we're just going to call it light switch. So now it's going to be static mesh. And let's call this light on mesh, or switch on mesh. We're going to do the exact same thing, but for switch off mesh. Now go ahead and build it. And if we click our light switch here, it's here in our light switch, switch on and switch off. For switch on, we want it to be light switch on. For switch off, obviously, light switch off. So now we need our little control variable. So make a boolean be light switch on. Let's just go ahead and set it for now to false, because at the end of this we're going to have it to where we can simply, well, from the editor we can have it set to be on by default or off by default, depending on however you want it to be. Let's go ahead and build so it runs the header tool. Now what we need to do inside of toggle light is all of our point lights that we have linked to the light switch, we need to be able to iterate through them. So for that we can use a for loop. So for, and as you recall, it is a point light. So a point light, call it light, then use a colon, then the name of the array, which is lights. So what's next is we have to get the light component from the light. So first off, we're going to check and make sure it's actually okay. So if light equals null pointer, so if it is null, we're going to continue. That means it's just going to run to the next. So anything we have after the continue statement, if continue runs, it's just going to skip anything else that we have after this line right here. Now we need to get the component, so light component. I'm just going to call it bulb, since that's kind of what it represents. Set that equal to light, find component by class, light component, and if bulb equals null pointer, we're going to continue. And now from here, we can change the kind of like the visibility of the bulb. So for that, we're going to use set visibility, which, yeah, that's the first thing I have up. So as you can see, it takes in two parameters. First one being the visibility. So if we want it to be on, we would write true. If we want it to be off, we would write false. And then the second parameter we can pretty much ignore. We're just going to set that to false. So bulb, set visibility, be light switch on, and false. So now we need to actually change the value of the light of this boolean here. So we can do that by setting it to equaling the opposite of itself. So be light switch on equals not be light switch on. So if be light switch on is true, when this line runs, it's going to turn from true to false. Then the opposite or not of be light switch on is false, and it's going to do that vice versa. So in theory, right now this should, if we go ahead and build, turn our point lights on and off. And it's not doing, oh, right, because it's setting it to true twice because I have it set to false at first. And as you can see, each time you press E, the lights turn on and off. I really want to move those into a better spot. I'm just going to lower them. Yeah, it's a lot clearer to see. Alright, so it is toggling the lights on and off. So now we need to change the mesh. That means we actually need to get the, trying to think of what it's called, the mesh component. Not sure why I included this twice. Go ahead and build. So let's go ahead and store it because we only need to run this once. So static mesh component. Mesh component. Here we need to go ahead and get it. So mesh component equals, I think it should just be, yeah, this, find component by class, use static mesh component. If mesh component does not equal null pointer, print out a message just to see. Just gonna call it error, or not error, Control Shift B. So it is in fact finding it. It's saying not error. So we're never good there. Let's just go ahead and, oh, I'm gonna set it so if it does equal null, it's gonna print out error getting mesh component, just to be on the safe side. Actually, we only need to do this outside it. I'm sorry. So if the light switch on, we want to set the current mesh to, well, obviously on. Actually, let me do and mesh component does not equal null pointer, just to be safe, so it's still going to run regardless. So mesh component set static mesh, and then the use static mesh that we want to assign it to, which in our case it is switch on mesh. The more I think about it, the more I realize that is just a terrible name. So else if, again, it does not equal null, we're going to set the mesh to off. So Control Shift B. Oops, I never left that one. So let's go ahead and run over to it. The first thing, the light switch is currently on. As you can see, hopefully in the video, that the lever is pointing upward. And as you can see now, it's kind of hard without the light there actually. F8. The switch is off. Let's go and possess, do it one more time. The switch is off and lights are off. Let's press E on it again. The lights are on, and the mesh of the switch is on as well. So right then and there, you automatically have a functional light. And we're not showing what you're supposed to be showing. Anyways, I guess it's just a little bug there. So now we need to have it set up so we can simply, from the editor, have just a default option. I'm going to put it under the category light switch as well. I think that would be, that'll be better fitting. Alright, so back in the header, we can make another option here. So you property, edit anywhere. Category is going to be light switch. And it's going to be a Boolean value. So bool, let's call it light, or default switch. Let's just call it value. I can't really think of much else to name it. As well as I want to make a little prototype for one more function. Let's do it down here. Let's bring you up here. So void light switch init and void light light switch init. And from begin play, I want to go ahead and call it. So light switch init, so that way it's going to go ahead and run whenever the game loads up, and we can set everything to be how we want it to be by default. I want to go ahead and just delete one of these, that light over there. Yes, I know. And we can just remove this little reference here. Whoops. Go ahead and file. Not that. File save, just for now. So, yep, already clicked on the mesh. Okay, so the default switch value. As you can see, currently the light switch is off, but the light itself is on. So I'm gonna, since the light switch is gonna be off by default, hence by this, so I'm gonna leave that off. Whenever we spawn in, instead of the light being on as well as the switch, and then the switch turning on, and then the light still being on, then we finally turn the switch off, and the light turns off. It's gonna just do that initially. So what we can do here is pretty much copy everything that we have, actually. So we already know what our value is. We don't need to change it. But all we need to do is simply change the mesh and set our lights to match it accordingly. Right, I'm actually recording this after I just made the light switch video, so it's all currently everything's working properly. But one thing I forgot to mention was, well, I forgot to do, was we never, on our light switch init, when we set our default switch value, well, when we use our default switch value, we're not actually using it anywhere. Instead, we're going purely based off of our current control variable. So what we need to do is simply, at the very top, be light switch on, set that equal to default switch value. So go ahead and build it. Let it do its thing. Come back over here. Light switch is currently off, as you can see by the switch value. So the light is off. And if I turn it on, the light, including the switch itself, is going to be on, just like so. Sorry about that. So Control-Shift-B. And now when we press play, as you can see, the light is now off. And I get the crotch out of the way. And the switch is off as well. So now when we walk up to it just like before, press E, light switch is on. As you can see by the angle of the arrow, including the light itself is on. And we can toggle it on and off just like that. Oh, there you go. You now have a functional light switch.